Part 1. The Silence Between Us. A gentle confession from Toronto. I remember the sound of the kettle. It was the only sound in the apartment that afternoon. Not the rustle of paper. Not the footsteps from your room. Just the soft hiss of steam, curling into the quiet like a sigh. We had grown used to silence, you and I. Not the peaceful kind. Not the kind that settles like warm tea in your chest. But the other kind. The kind that stretches across the couch like a cold wind. The kind that hums with all the words we stop saying. I used to count how many days we went without a real sentence. 3. Then 5. Then 10. Funny, isn't it? How two people can share a space, breathe the same air, eat at the same table but feel like strangers stranded in different provinces. You were my mother. And I, your only daughter. But in those months, we were more like polite guests in each other's lives. Good morning. Don't forget your keys. Want some tea? Each word rehearsed. Safe. Like we were trying not to touch a bruise that never healed right. I think back now to that winter. The snow hadn't fallen yet, but the sky already carried the weight of it. Gray and tired. The air inside the apartment matched it, thick, unmoving, as if even the walls were holding their breath. And me, I had learned to live with the quiet. Learned to tiptoe around your mood. Learned to hold my questions like tiny sparrows in my chest, fluttering, restless, never quite set free. What did I want to ask you? Maybe do you remember the lake? That day we drove out of the city, and you let me choose the music. We sang off-key to Leonard Cohen, and I laughed so hard I cried. Or maybe do you still miss Dad? The way your hands trembled when you found his old sweater behind the dresser. You didn't know I saw, but I never asked, and you never offered. We became excellent at that, didn't we? Perfectly synchronized in our avoidance. Two dancers moving around the same center of pain, careful not to step on each other's shadows. Until the day I found your letter. It wasn't meant for me. It wasn't hidden either. Just folded, sitting inside the book you'd been reading, the edges worn, like it had been read more than once, maybe even written more than once. I didn't read it, not that day, but I stared at it the way a child stares at a door they're not supposed to open. Part of me curious, the other part afraid of what lived behind it. And something inside me shifted. That night, I sat across from you at dinner. The same table, the same chairs. But something was different. I watched your hands as you buttered your toast, the tiny tremor in your right thumb, the way you always avoided eye contact when you were tired. You looked up then, just for a moment, and in that single glance, I saw the loneliness behind your smile, the grief that still lived in the corners of your eyes. It hit me like cold water. I wasn't the only one hurting. I wasn't the only one waiting for someone to speak first. You were waiting too. I don't remember who broke the silence. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was the tea kettle again, singing its soft, sad song in the background. But something opened that night. A tiny crack. Like the first thaw of spring beneath the ice. You asked how work was. I asked if you'd slept well. Small questions. But they landed soft. Like feathers on old wounds. And for the first time in months, I felt something warm between us. Not words. Not apologies. Just space. Safe. Open space where something new could grow. I didn't say everything I wanted to. Not that night. But I went to bed with a different kind of silence, the kind that comforts instead of cuts. The kind that says, I see you. I miss you. We're still here. And maybe that's enough. For now. Maybe healing starts in the smallest places. Not in grand gestures. Not in perfect conversations, but in the soft shift of a gaze. In a whispered good night that carries more weight than it lets on. In the quiet that no longer feels empty because it's shared. So here I am now, writing this. Not to accuse, not to reopen wounds, but to remember. To honor the silence that taught me how to listen, how to see you again. Not as a mystery, but as my mother. And to whisper to the part of me that still wonders, still aches. You were never the enemy. We just forgot how to speak the same language for a while. But I'm learning again. Slowly. Gently. Like a child relearning how to say I love you without fear of what might come next. Tonight, I lit a candle by the window. The same way you used to do, every time I was late coming home. A tiny light in the dark. Maybe that's what this letter is. My way of telling you I'm still here. Still listening. Still hoping the silence between us can become a bridge instead of a wall. Part 2. What I never told you from Gentle Confessions. I never told you how much I needed you. Not just in the way people say it, as a reflex, when they're having a bad day or life feels heavier than usual. I mean, I needed you. Like oxygen in a locked room. Like the small, invisible thread that holds a soul from drifting off into something unrecognizable. But I didn't say it. Not once. I told myself you already knew. That maybe we didn't have to name something to prove that it existed. I thought you could read it in my eyes. Or in the quiet way I waited for your messages. Even if I never said a word about missing you. But silence, as I've come to learn, doesn't always translate as love. Sometimes, it just sounds like distance. And distance, it echoes. There were so many things I thought I'd have time to say. I thought we'd have years. I imagined us sitting across from each other in a small cafe in our 50s, laughing over memories that only we would find funny. I thought we'd outgrow our awkward 20s and look back with a fond kind of embarrassment. I even thought we'd be at each other's weddings, cheering so loud they'd have to ask us to be quiet. And yet, here I am, whispering to the dark, writing a confession that should have been said to your face. And every word feels a little like betrayal, because I waited too long. Do you remember that one night, we stayed up until almost 4 a.m., talking about everything and nothing? You were lying on the floor, head resting on a folded sweater. I was curled up on the couch, legs tucked underneath me. The lamp was the only light on, casting that soft amber hue that made everything feel safe. We talked about fear, yours, mine, about who we wanted to be, about the people we were scared of turning into. And just before you fell asleep, you said, "Promise me we'll never let this go." I smiled, and I nodded, but I never actually said yes. Maybe that was the first crack in the wall we were building. Maybe if I just opened my mouth and said I promise, we wouldn't have drifted. Maybe we still would have, but at least then I wouldn't have this gnawing ache in my chest. The one that wonders if I failed you. The truth is, I was scared of needing someone that much. Scared of handing over the most fragile parts of myself and hoping they'd be safe in your hands. Scared that if you knew just how much I depended on your presence, your laughter, your quiet little check-ins, you might disappear. So I played it cool. I made jokes. I shrugged. I was so afraid of losing you that I distanced myself. Just enough to create a buffer. A safety net. Something to soften the blow in case you ever left. And in doing that, I think I wrote the ending of our story without even realizing it. There's this moment I think about often. You were standing in the hallway. Your coat already on. You looked back at me with this expression. Like you were waiting for me to say something. Anything. To give you a reason to stay a little longer. Or to remind you that you mattered more than you probably realized. But I didn't say a word. I just waved. Smiled. Told you to take care. I never said don't go too far. I never said I miss you already. I never said please stay. And when the door closed behind you, something about the silence felt different. Heavier. Final. That was the last time we saw each other. You messaged a few times. I responded. But slower. Shorter. Life got louder. Work pulled us in different directions. And soon, the person I once told everything to became someone I updated like a status. I'm good. Hope you're good too. That was the last message I sent you. But I wasn't good. Not really. 'Cause here's what I never told you, I still kept your birthday in my calendar. I still passed by our favorite cafe and paused every time just in case. I still typed out messages I never sent, rereading them like they were part of a story I didn't know how to finish. I missed you in the quietest ways. When my days were too loud and my nights too long. When I laughed and wanted someone to get the reference. When I cried and wished someone would just know without asking. There was this softness in you that the world didn't have. You were gentle with me. In a way that made me feel like I could exist without having to perform. And I don't know if I ever thanked you for that. So here I am, whispering to the dark again, hoping that somewhere, some version of you, can hear this. I'm sorry for the things I never said. I'm sorry for the spaces I let grow between us. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to leave quietly. I'm not writing this to change anything. I know some silences are permanent. Some chapters close without warning. But I just needed you to know that you mattered. That you still matter. And that if I could go back to that night floor, lamp, 4A, I wouldn't nod silently. I'd say it out loud. I promise. I won't let this go. Part 3. The last time I saw her face. It was a late afternoon in Toronto when the air carried that gentle, golden warmth, the kind that lingers not from the sun, but from the memory of a voice. I remember the way the light wrapped around the window of the cafe on Queen Street, melting into amber, diffusing through the steam of my untouched tea. And then I saw her through the glass, through time walking toward me as if the years had simply folded like the corners of an old letter. She hadn't changed. Her hair still fell in those soft, rebellious waves. A little longer now. Maybe. Her coat flared slightly at the hem, catching the light with each step. And her eyes were still the same. Deep, hazel oceans where every word unsaid once found its anchor. I stood up too quickly. My chair scraped the floor like a nervous whisper. She smiled, half joy, half hesitation, and stepped inside. The little bell above the door sang its quiet welcome, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if this was truly happening, or if memory had grown bold enough to conjure her one more time. We sat across from each other. The world didn't rush. It never does. When you're standing on the edge of a goodbye, you never had the courage to speak. "Hi," she said. Just that. And I smiled. "Hi." There was a silence that followed, not the kind that divides, but the kind that understands. Our eyes carried the weight of everything that hadn't been said. I noticed a tiny scar on her left hand I hadn't seen before. She noticed I'd stopped wearing the watch she once gave me. Neither of us asked. Instead, she reached into her coat and pulled out a letter. Folded, worn at the creases. It looked like it had been held many times, touched by hesitation, soaked perhaps in regret. "I wrote this after you left," she said, gently placing it on the table. "I never sent it. I didn't open it. I couldn't. Not yet. Do you want to read it now?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not yet. I just want to remember this." She smiled again, and something in her eyes softened. We spoke of small things. The way Toronto winters had been unusually mild. The new bookstore that opened on Spadina. Her move to Vancouver. And how the mountains had begun to whisper to her at night. I told her about my new apartment, the creaky steps, and how the neighbors baked too much banana bread. We laughed. Lightly, carefully, as if the sound might wake the ghosts between us. Then she said it. "I missed you. Not all the time, but in the moments I didn't expect. Like hearing our song in a grocery store, or finding one of your old texts when I searched for something else." My breath caught in the back of my throat. "I missed you too," I said, in the quietest ways. Outside, the city moved on. Streetcars hummed past. Leaves tumbled across sidewalks. But inside, time curled up and rested its head on our table. We didn't rush. We didn't try to solve what was broken. We were just there. Two people who once shared a story, sitting at the final comma. She touched the letter again. Her fingers traced its edges. I wondered how many times she'd written, rewritten, and folded it away. How many words had stayed trapped inside her chest, waiting for a moment like this. "I thought I'd never see you again," she whispered. So did I. We let silence fill the spaces where words would have done more harm than good. And then, as the shadows stretched across the floor, she stood. "I have to go," she said. I nodded. I didn't ask why. I didn't ask to stay. She picked up the letter, and for a second, I thought she'd take it back. But then, she placed it gently in my hand. "Maybe read it someday. Maybe not. But it's yours now." And just like that, she turned. The bell sang once more. Softer this time. And she was gone. I sat there for a long time after, tracing the creases of the paper, I didn't open it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I held it to my chest like it was the last warmth left in the world. Because sometimes, the most beautiful part of a story is the silence that follows the final word. Part 4. The light that waited in the hallway. I remember the hallway light. Not the overhead one. No. That stayed off. As if it, too, knew the weight of silence that hung in the air that day. I'm talking about the one near the floor. A small, soft bulb tucked behind the umbrella stand, casting a golden pool that barely kissed the edge of her shoes. I stood there, just outside her door, watching that light spill across the floor, lighting up her silhouette. She hadn't noticed me yet. Or maybe she had, and she was simply waiting. We had always met like that, quietly, unintentionally choreographed. Like our bodies knew the steps before our minds could catch up. I stepped into the light. She turned. Her face was the same, almost painfully so, as if time had refused to touch her, but had made sure I carried every wrinkle of waiting, every shadow of regret. She didn't smile. Not yet. But her eyes widened just a little, like the moment before a curtain rises. "Hi," I said. It felt like I was borrowing the word from an earlier life one where things weren't broken. "Hi," she echoed. That was all. And it was enough. We stood there in the light, and it was like the rest of the world dimmed. She leaned against the door frame, one hand resting on the wood like it was the only thing keeping her from dissolving. I stayed standing, unsure if moving forward would close the distance or destroy something fragile. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I wasn't sure either." She laughed short, breathy, but it reached her eyes. That was always how I knew she meant it. "But you did." I nodded. The silence between us was soft. Not awkward, more like cotton wrapped around a wound. Gentle, protective. She looked down at her feet, then back up. "There's tea, if you want." I followed her inside. The hallway seemed longer as I walked it, every step echoing 1,000 memories. The way she used to hum while pouring water. The chipped cup she always gave me, because she said it matched my stubbornness. And then we were in the kitchen. It hadn't changed. The same checkered curtains. The same dent in the counter from when I dropped her mother's teapot years ago. She still hadn't replaced it. I wondered if that was on purpose. She poured the tea without asking how I liked it. She knew. 1 sugar. No milk. Always. I wrapped my hands around the cup and let the warmth seep into me. "You look tired," she said. "I've been carrying too many things. Put some of them down. Just for a while." And I did. Not physically, but something in me eased. The way you relax into a familiar song. "Why now?" she asked. "Because the silence got too loud. Because I kept seeing your face in strangers. Because I needed to know if the light still waited in the hallway." She nodded. Her eyes shimmered, but no tears fell. "It did. I left it on for you." I smiled, and it hurt the kind of pain that tells you you're still alive. We talked until the tea went cold. About nothing, and about everything. The years folded into themselves like pages of a well-loved book. We didn't fix anything. We didn't need to. When I stood to leave, she walked me back to the hallway. The light was still there. "You'll write to me?" she asked. "Yes." "Will you send it this time?" I paused. I think I already have." She smiled. I opened the door and stepped back into the dark. But the light clung to me soft, warm, and still waiting. And that was the last time I saw her face. But somehow, not the last time I felt her there. One day, when the rain tapped softly against the windows of our little home in Vancouver, I imagined sitting by the fireplace with my children. The room will be dimly lit, shadows dancing on the walls, the warmth of the hearth wrapping around us like an old, familiar memory. And in my hands, I will hold this letter folded, aged, and fragile, like the silence it once carried. I will tell them about her, not just the way she looked, though I remember it all, the lines around her eyes that deepened when she smiled, the way her scarf smelled faintly of lavender and ink, the softness of her hands when she cupped my cheek for the last time. I will tell them who she was, the woman who taught me how silence can be sacred, how love can live in unfinished conversations. I will not begin with sorrow. No. I will begin with the first moment she held me in her arms as a child. How I cried and she didn't hush me, but listened. How her presence could quiet any storm, not with words, but with being. She was not loud in this world, but she echoed. My children will ask what I regret, and I will smile, because I do not regret loving her. I regret the spaces I never filled with words, the mornings I could have said more, the nights I stayed quiet, thinking there would always be time. I will unfold the letter slowly. The creases will crackle, and I will read it aloud, not to mourn, but to remember. Dear Mom, I don't know why I never gave you this. Maybe I was afraid that once the words were real, they could never be taken back, that they would exist forever, like stars whose light reaches Earth long after they've burned out. But I want you to know, I carry you in the way I pause before speaking, the way I wrap my daughter in blankets the same way you wrapped me, in the way I leave the light on in the hallway, just in case someone needs to find their way home. You are the voice I hear when I ask myself what is right. You are the warmth I feel when I forgive someone who doesn't deserve it. You are the silence I return to when the world becomes too loud. And I love you. In every word I never said. In every moment I thought would come later. In every letter I never sent. The fire will flicker softly, and my children will be quiet. One of them might ask, "Did she ever hear it?" And I will say, "No. But I think she always knew." Because some love is like that. It exists in the quiet, in the spaces between breaths, in the letters we write but never send. I will fold the letter again, carefully, place it back in its envelope, and I will tell them, one day, you'll have something to say that you're afraid won't be heard. Say it anyway, even if your voice shakes, even if the moment has passed, because love, real love, waits. And as the rain continues to fall outside, I will know that even though she is gone, her story lives on not just in me, but in the gentleness I pass forward, In the silences I now fill with meaning. And perhaps one day, when I'm gone too, my children will find this letter, and they will read it to their children, and she will be there, again, in the firelight, in the quiet, in the love that never needed to be spoken to be real.